Hello to everybody watching this live as well as those watching the recording in the future. It's great to be here with you. My name is John. I'm the CEO here of Stub Group and joined by today by two of our team members, Lucian, who's our Director of Google Compliance here at Stub Group, and Becky, who is our Director of Sales and Business Development. So Becky, Lucian, how's it going today?
Great.
It's
Great.
yeah.
Great to be here.
You ready to
It's
talk
all
all things Google Ads suspensions?
Always are.
yeah.
Yep.
I feel like that's all I've done today already. So let's just recap everything that's happened so far today, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Just another
exactly.
day.
This is a very interesting time to be having this conversation because there's been some massive changes, as we all know very well, within this past week that are significantly impacting how the suspension world and how Google works with suspensions. So we're going to get into all that as part of the conversation here. I would say, just to contextualize it for those who are watching this and don't have this history, we've been working in suspension space, helping advertisers get unsuspended for over a decade at this point. And we've seen a lot of changes, obviously, over time. We've seen new policies come out. We've seen Google change policies. We've seen changes to Google's appeal process and different things. But I think we can pretty accurately say that the change that's just impacted things this last week or so is one of the bigger changes that Google has rolled out. And I know, Becky, you're hearing from a lot of people who are reaching out to us, freaking out because they're not sure what to do. And so we're going to talk about what those changes are as part of this conversation. We'll talk about some of the actions that we're taking to still fix suspensions, even in this somewhat new paradigm that Google's rolled out. And obviously, we'd love to see any questions that come through as well, and we'll answer those. So to maybe kick things off, Lucian, could you kind of go through what are the changes that Google has announced that they're making and have started making to the suspension space, and also what are some of the glitches that we're seeing as Google kind of rolls these changes out?
Yeah. So Google's saying that basically you can't make certain actions in your suspended Google Ads account anymore, which seems like a problem. However, some of those things aren't true. Some of them are true. And for the ones that are true, we've found ways to still get accounts unsuspended. But for example, Google says that you can't, you can go through verification. We've seen some glitches where actually you can't go through advertiser verification. So we know, a lot of people are concerned because they can't appeal their suspended account or go through verification. However, we found some ways around that. There's certain things in the Google Ads account that you can't do, like remove campaigns, add users, and change billing and stuff like that. It's a little bit inconsistent in terms of like what they're enforcing. But overall, there's certain things that have rolled out into the Google Ads accounts, and certain things that they said that actually haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For context for those watching, historically, up until last week, literally, you could do anything in a suspended Google Ads account that you could do in a non-suspended Google Ads account, with pretty much just the exception of your ads aren't actually going to run live. But you could make changes to ads, you could create new campaigns, you could remove campaigns, you could add users to your account, fill in the blank, do pretty much anything that you needed. And obviously, when people get suspended, often they'll say, okay, well, what may have gone wrong? And so they'll try and make changes in the account, and then submit an appeal to Google and say, hey, here's what we changed. We've fixed what we think the problem is. Please unsuspend our account. Mm-hmm. And so like you mentioned, Lucian, the big change that Google has made is that now most of those actions that you could take historically are read only. So in other words, you can't remove campaigns. Mm-hmm. You can't create campaigns. You can't change your ad URLs. You can't remove words from your ads. You can't even, it appears, Google hasn't explicitly said this, but from what we're seeing, it looks like you can't even add users to a suspended account to give someone else access to actually see it. And I think I should also clarify, as best as we can tell so far, these changes are applying to accounts that are suspended as of like late last week and moving forward. So there's still accounts that were suspended prior to last week, and we're recording this. It's June 27th. So for those watching in the future, just to set this in time. So kind of accounts suspended mid-ish June 2024 and later. This is what these changes are applying to. Accounts suspended prior to that, still as of this point, you could still make changes and do everything that you could, historically in those accounts. Becky, I'll flip things over to you here for a minute. What are some of the top concerns, issues that you're seeing people have who are calling us with suspended accounts trying to find solutions?
Yeah, it's interesting because anybody who's dealing with the suspension, they're always like kind of in beast mode, right? They were running ads, or they're ready to run ads. Everything was in line, and boom, you've got a suspended account, and you don't know what to do. I think the big difference right now is that thanks to people like us, there's a lot of content out there about suspensions. We have an entire YouTube channel that says, here's what you can do, here's what you can try, here's how you might be able to fix it on your own. And they go there, maybe they watch it, and they get into their Google Ads account, and they're ready to do those things, and it's obsolete now. The number one thing that people are bringing up is that they go to appeal, and they see the pink bar across, right? The red bar of death, as we all call it here. And it says your account's suspended, fix it, or contact us. They click that button. They land on another page that says, in order to appeal your suspension, you must complete advertiser verification. And then they click that button. And when they do, they're getting a white box that pops up and says, sorry, your account's suspended. You can't perform this action while it's suspended. And that's not something that we had planned on happening with these. We kind of knew that this freeze of suspended accounts was coming. Google sent a email out to everyone a couple of months ago, kind of warning of this, but not being able to complete the advertiser verification, business operations verification, or appeal action wasn't listed in there. So even people that thought that they knew that this could happen are really freaking out because they think it must be only in their account, right? It must be a glitch. But the answer is it's not. It's happening in a lot of accounts. And it is scary because you really feel like there's nothing you can do to appeal the suspension or move forward. So people are reaching out to us a lot faster than they normally would because they can't really tackle anything on their own without some sort of help. So I think the need feels a lot more urgent to them. Whereas if they would appeal and wait and appeal and wait, and get rejected and then come to us, then they're kind of already accustomed to the fact that, okay, I'm suspended. It's going to take a while to get it back. Now it's like, oh my gosh, I need to get unsuspended now. They haven't come to that realization. So that's one thing. Another thing a couple of agencies have spoken with us about is the fact that, when an agency is holding this account in an MCC, for example, they can still see it in there. They're able to see the suspension, but again, they can't perform any actions inside the ad account. So that's really frustrating for agencies to try to explain to their clients as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think, like you mentioned, the glitch of not being able to submit advertiser verification or submit an appeal, like you said, it's not a glitch that's only specific to one account. So if you're seeing this, it's not just you. There's other people seeing the same thing. I do think it's a glitch as far as overall how Google's system is working, because Google has explicitly told us you can still submit an appeals and you can still submit advertiser verification in suspended accounts. So that's not matching. Google's official policy is not matching up with what's actually happening, which, if you work in the world of Google, that happens all the time. So that's not super surprising.
Yeah.
That's why you have to bring experts in to fix suspensions, is because there are so many of those inconsistencies and frustrations with Google. But my speculation currently is that Google will change that, and that we will see the ability consistently to submit appeals and to submit advertiser verification through accounts, directly through the accounts. Like Lucian mentioned, we have some paths we can still follow, some workarounds that we've figured out to be able to still help clients who are in this situation. So if you're in that situation, definitely reach out. We'd love to help you with that. But it adds some spice to the process for sure.
Yeah.
We've got a live question here coming from LinkedIn. So let me just read this question off. Google is requiring verification now, and as of when? I didn't receive an email about this. So great question. First, let's talk about what verification is for anyone watching who doesn't understand what that is, and then I'll talk about how it applies to accounts right now. So there's two different types of verification that Google can require you to go through for a Google Ads account. One is called advertiser verification or advertiser identity verification. And that is where you submit information verifying your identity. Surprise, surprise. So we're talking about usually documents for your business, like articles of incorporation, that type of thing, and photo ID showing you are who you say you are, and that your addresses match up, payment methods match up, that kind of thing. And so that's that's the easiest verification you can go through, generally speaking. Then for some accounts, Google's also requiring something they call business operations verification, which is a much more involved set of questions that they ask you about how your business operates. Are you directly providing services? Are you reselling for a third party? How do you communicate with your customers? On and on and on. And so it can be a pretty complicated form to go through. So the way that this applies to suspended Google Ads accounts is many times, not every single time, and Lucian, correct me if I'm wrong there, but many times Google is requiring or at least suggesting that you go through verification as part of the appeals process. The idea is that you're proving to Google your legitimacy and that helps get you unsuspended. And in some cases, Google is literally requiring you have to go through verification. Lucian, where are we at right now? Is it always a requirement, or is that still in kind of a case-by-case basis?
I'm going to say it's supposed to always be, but there's still sometimes when we can submit without going through it first. But for the majority of people, it's you're going to have to go through it first.
Got it. Yep. And that's one of the frustrations, going back to the glitches again, that people are mentioning, is they're seeing Google say you have to go through verification before you can appeal, but then Google's also saying you can't go through verification. And so that's where it gets interesting, and that's where we've been able to find some ways around that. Got another question here from Bill. Can you help get multiple GMB locations under one verified GMB? For those who don't know the acronym, GMB stands for Google My Business, which of course Google has already renamed to Google Business Profiles. But yeah, I still call it GMB most of the time because it was that for years. And it's a great question. Lucian, do you have any thoughts to throw towards that?
Yes, I do actually. I think it depends on if both of the profiles have the same information. If they do have the same information, they're both verified, you could merge them. Something Google can do. If they're not the same, then Google might not be able to merge them into one. So it just depends.
What's an example of why someone might have multiple GMB locations they want to merge?
Maybe they just accidentally created like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, and they just want to merge them into one. So I would say that's probably the most common example. Maybe a business name changed and it's no longer relevant. So those are probably 2 of the most common things we see.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that if your Google My Business profile is suspended and you're trying to merge it because of that, you're not going to be able to do that without getting the suspended profile reinstated.
Yep, absolutely. Question from Stephanie. How does it make any sense from Google's point of view to make their process so opaque that we need to hire a third-party company as a Sherpa guide to navigate their systems? I really don't understand why they're making things so convoluted. Stephanie, I agree with you. I don't understand, and I cannot answer the question of why Google does things the way they do, but I can provide some thoughts from what I've seen, again, over the years of working with this. Ultimately, what Google's trying to do is they are trying to keep bad actors from using Google's platform. They're trying to keep scammers away, people who've got malware in their websites, people who are promoting horrible things that Google doesn't want to be associated with, etc. And so Google has all these processes and systems in place to try and protect their ecosystem. And I'm grateful that they do, because if they didn't, it would be the absolute wild, wild west. And we probably wouldn't want to click on an ad ever on Google, because you never know what might happen. Unfortunately, Google also, in the process of catching as many bad actors as they can, they also suspend tons of legitimate advertisers. And that's just related to the volume of which they work. Last year alone, Google suspended, I believe it was over 12 million advertiser accounts. Most of those, I assume, were bad actors who should have been suspended. But I also know there were a ton of legit advertisers because many of them reach out to us for help.
Right.
And I think part of why Google makes it so difficult once they suspend you to figure out what you quote unquote did wrong and get back online is because Google doesn't want to write a game plan that can then be gamed by those bad actors. They don't want to say exactly here's the A, B, and C of if you just do this or don't exactly do that. Here's how you use our ecosystem, because then those bad actors are going to try and follow those to game the system and get online with their ads. I think that's part of why Google has that approach. I think there's other reasons as well. I think Google wants to protect itself from liability. So the more specific Google is in telling you, here's why you were suspended. If they got it wrong, if their algorithm, if it said, oh, you did this and you didn't do this, they don't want to open themselves up to lawsuits from people saying, hey, you hurt my business, cost of opportunity, etc. So I think there's also just a legal liability aspect that is involved. And then I think also the reality is that Google is such a large organization. There are so many moving parts that the right hand often doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And so there's often just a lack of clarity within Google itself as to what is required to get unsuspended. I mean, I think a good example, Becky, you could speak to this. There's some internal conversations at Google, I think, going on about Stub Group specifically recently.
Yeah, we've actually had several people come to us, and they have a Google rep or someone that they've chatted with at Google, and they've said, listen, I don't have an answer for you, but here's a company that I recommend you work with, and actually sent them to us for answers. That's something I tell people all the time. I think that when you're looking at it from a standpoint of understanding how to navigate Google Ads suspensions from a white hat perspective, we often know more about doing that than your average Google rep would know. We just know that's what we do. It's all day long, Lucian and his team, that's all they work on here at Stub Group. They're not multitasking for our great ongoing management clients or anything like that. They're head down in the weeds, getting people verified, getting people unsuspended, and getting ads approved all day long. So they know so much about it that even a Google rep knows to say, hey, I can't help you, but give them a call and they can.
Yeah, I sometimes compare Google to the IRS or the court system in that, hey, once you get into a problematic place, there's a reason you go hire a tax expert or you go hire a lawyer, because it's just so convoluted, complex. There's so much, case law and different ways that different people approach things and different, processes internally, that it's just very, I mean, it's hard for us to navigate. And like Becky just said, we do this all the time. We've been doing this for a decade. We have people who literally only do this work. And it's still, challenging and requires nuance and figuring things out and trial and error. And so it's just really difficult for people who are just trying to run a business and don't want to spend their life, figuring out a silly Google Ads suspension. They just want to run their business and make money. And I think that happens a lot as well. Lucian, a question for you. Bill sent a follow-up question about that Google My Business, Google Business Profile question. He said he does not want to merge. He just wants to show up as having 4 locations, which he does have. What would you say to that?
I think Google should allow you to have multiple profiles for each location, as long as, it sounds like they verified them already. So you went through verification and you showed them it's a physical location, you showed them your signage and everything. So, if they verified it and they're okay with it, and it's actually, a separate location, as long as they're not overlapping or Google, thinks you're gaining an unfair advantage in any way, it should be okay. There's a lot of nuances to that, but overall, I think it should be okay.
And I think it's important to note that the addresses are what's really important about that, Lucian, right? We've seen that with other people. The address that you're using at those different locations, it's really, really important. If you're trying to use a person's home address or something like that, Google can get really confused.
That's true. Yeah. So you just got to do it the right way if you're going to do it, and have multiple locations. Just abide by their guidelines.
Yeah. And Bill, because it is very nuanced, feel free if you want to reach out to us, hello@stepgroup.com, shoot us an email. We'd love to figure out more of exactly what your situation is and see if we can give you some more nuanced advice that's going to be helpful to you. Let's see, you got some more questions coming in. Jeremiah from LinkedIn says, I want to start running some ads for a new client. How do I load their payment information into my Google Ads account with there being any issues? Without there being any issues, or is this something I shouldn't do and have them create their own Google Ads account and go from there? Thank you. Great question, Jeremiah. We have a lot of agencies reaching out to us with issues and this type of questions, so you're asking the right questions. Lucian, you want to go ahead and kind of speak to the pros and cons of payment methods at the agency level and what we see work best there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of ways to, set up accounts, especially if you're a client. You could get them to create it and then link to that and go from there. You could create it for them. So I guess it just depends. It sounds like you're trying to upload your client's information. So it should be fine as long as Google doesn't have a problem like overall with that payment method. Maybe it's associated with another suspended account. Maybe just like the payment method Google thinks is suspicious in general. So as long as it's like a good payment method and it hasn't been used in other suspended accounts, it should be fine. Obviously, there's no guarantees when you upload it, but yeah, overall, I think it should be okay.
Yeah, I think the biggest things I would say to be aware of is when you're using the same payment method for multiple accounts, that often triggers Google to think that something is suspicious. It's not actually against Google's policies. Google has no policy saying that you can't use the same payment method for multiple Google Ads accounts. And there's plenty of situations in which people do and don't have a problem. But there's also a lot of situations in which we see Google flag an account, usually for suspicious payments is the policy they mention, sometimes others. So what we'll see happen sometimes is an agency is working with a client and maybe the client had their own Google Ads account with their payment method. Then the agency creates a new Google Ads account for the client and they want the client to to pay the ad spend directly to Google. And so they put the client's credit card in there and then that flags Google to think something is suspicious. Or vice versa, you'll have situations where an agency wants to use their payment method for multiple client accounts, and they want it, so they put their own credit card across multiple client accounts. And again, that can flag things. So not 100% of the time, it's not always consistent, and it's not technically against policies, but it's definitely, I'd say, a red flag and something you want to be aware of and to mitigate as much as possible, making sure that you're not, as much as possible, not using the same payment method across multiple accounts. Or if you are, that it's an invoicing payment method, because Google's more acceptant of that across multiple accounts. They kind of understand that if you have a credit line with Google and you've gone through invoicing terms, that's probably going to apply to multiple accounts. And so that's less likely to create those red flags.
Yeah. And I also want to note that we have seen issues with people who have one Google Ads account where they're trying to run ads for multiple URLs in that because they're a freelancer or they're an agency. And it has caused some problems with verification. Google can get confused when you have 10 different payment methods for 10 different URLs in one Google Ad account. And I know we've talked to a couple people that really struggled with getting through advertiser verification and or business operations verification because of having all of that in one ad account. So if you have the ability to create their own ad account, I think it probably mitigate your risk as much as possible, because so the difference, Lucian is used to resolving that problem, whereas I'm talking to people about preventing it sometimes, and so is John. So I would typically be like, I just take the most simple path first. But speaking of payment methods, I think another thing that's important to note is Google is changing that with some people too, right? They're updating the way that they allow you to pay and actually forcing some people to use invoicing, right, John?
Yeah, this is something important to be aware of because it could essentially cause your account to be suspended if you don't make a change in time. Google's reaching out to a lot of different ad accounts, and they are saying we no longer, for those particular ad accounts, are going to accept payment via credit or debit card. They're forcing you to switch over to either monthly invoicing or to direct debit from bank accounts. The obvious reason why they're doing this is because they don't want to pay transaction fees on those transactions. They don't have to pay the the credit card company 3% or whatever the case may be. And so they're pushing this change to a lot of ad accounts. This is something as a concept it's been around for a long time, but generally it was applied really to much higher spending accounts where there's just a lot of money going through each month. Now we're seeing this applied to accounts that even aren't spending that much in the grand scheme of things. And Google hasn't explicitly said why they choose which accounts or what the thresholds are or are not. But I've seen this across a wide variety of business of different industries, different accounts, new accounts, old accounts, amounts they're spending. Haven't really seen a pattern per se. So something to be aware of. Google should send you an email or send an email to whoever the admin is on the account saying this needs to happen. They give some time for it. I think usually it's like 1 to 2 months in which you have a grace period to switch things over. And then if you don't switch things over, they're going to stop running your ads until you do. And for what it's worth, we've pushed back on this on behalf of clients to Google, and so far they've been a brick wall saying, nope, sorry, this is what it is. It doesn't have to do with credit history. We've got clients who've been paying faithfully for years, and Google said, hey, nope, there's nothing wrong with your payment method. We're not concerned about that. It's just this is what we're doing. So yeah, definitely something to be aware of.
And I think it's also important to note that, like, from an agency perspective, agencies who are not using invoicing and are using their agency payment method across multiple Google Ads accounts are the most common ones to come to us with 7 or 8, 9, 10, or 50 accounts all suspended together because they had that same payment method in. Whereas if they're using invoicing, we don't see that happen. So I know sometimes people push back against it, but it's not as scary as it sounds. It's kind of something that could be really valuable to you, especially if you're an agency or a freelancer that's managing multiple accounts.
Absolutely. Got another question here from LinkedIn. I think going back to what we mentioned earlier about why does Google suspend things? So the question is, what quantifies bad actors aside from the bad malware people? Also, if I wanted to change out my primary form of payment, will this trigger Google to suspend the account again? It's 2 good questions. I'll answer the first question first. So what are bad actors? Well, malware, like you mentioned, obviously is one of the most obvious ones. There's a lot of examples. A few that come to mind would be scam websites that are selling products, or I should say taking your money, but not sending you products. This is something that really popped up during COVID. Tons of fly-by-night drop shippers capitalizing on the e-commerce craze, and they take your money and then you never get anything. Other examples would be people who are advertising in verticals that Google just is not willing to show ads for. Now, I'm not going to debate whether or not those are bad actors, but Google has just decided, hey, we're not going to run ads for things like, remote tech support as an example, or, some adult related content, weapons, different things where Google's saying, hey, we're just not interested in being in this space. And so we're going to prevent, anybody from advertising. Those, I would say, less bad actors and just more of very insensitive verticals that Google's not interested in supporting. And then 2, Google doesn't just look at your ad account and your website. They also look at your reputation online. So if Google's seeing, hey, your business is getting tons and tons of poor reviews, people are saying, hey, the product is not what it's advertised to be, or hey, they're charging me more than they told me to be, or whatever the case may be, Google will often suspend advertiser accounts there as well, because again, they're trying to keep their ecosystem as clean, as useful as possible. And if people consistently are, navigating through Google, clicking on ads, and then having a bad experience, then that taints their perspective of Google as well. And so those are a few examples. I know there's more that I'm just not thinking of at the moment, but those are some of the examples of what Google is trying to protect their users from.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that Google gets confused. There are some very fine lines between what you can and cannot do according to their policies. And when that happens, we often see people get suspended, but we also see their ads just get limited in many cases where they're not able to even spend. We see it a lot in the government docs space in particular, where they're approved. Sometimes they've even passed verification and been certified to run these ads on Google, but the algorithms are still limiting what they can spend.
Absolutely, and that's a great segue. I'll come back to answer your second question there in a minute from LinkedIn, but that's a perfect segue to talk about limited ad serving, which is a really hot topic right now. Lucian, could you explain what we're seeing with limited ad serving, what that means, and some of the actions we're taking to help clients with that?
Sure. So like Becky mentioned, you can see it in like an individual ad where Google limits that ad. But a new thing that Google rolled out recently was they limit, basically, it looks like your whole account. So in the top bar, it'll be like a yellow notification that says your ads are limited due to the limiting ad serving policy. So this basically means that Google's not going to serve your ads as often as you would like. So you might not be able to hit budget, other goals that you have. So obviously it's better than your ads being disapproved and your account being suspended, but it can still be a huge problem, especially if you're trying to scale up your ads. So it basically means that Google doesn't fully trust your brand yet. So some steps that you could take are, make sure you're not misleading users in any way, so that your ads and your landing page, it's all consistent information, and you're being transparent with Google. So I would say do that. There's certain things that Google outlines on their policy page, like you can, pin your domain in the ads. So we know ad copy can be definitely a big problem. But overall, just try and be as transparent as possible in your ads and your website, and your keywords. And it can take time for the policy to go away, but do those things and then appeal. And don't get discouraged.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's really important is to know whether or not your ads are actually limited in serving, right? Because a lot of times people will see that there and they're freaking out because they see that notification, but their ads are still spending just fine. So I think before you freak out, make sure that your ads actually are limited. And if they are, then there are ways and workarounds to get that fixed. But in some cases, it'll say limited ads serving and the ads are still serving just fine.
Yeah, 100%. And we've seen that be the case where that flag comes out, and then we just monitor impressions and click volume closely, and the graph is steady. There's no change, and sometimes it may still be worthwhile appealing it just for peace of mind. Other times it may actually be safer to not appeal it, because if it's not impacting things, you don't need to create problems for yourself and be like, oh, actually, yeah, we meant to limit your ads. Let's go ahead and do that now that you put us on the radar. So there's always lots of nuances to how you want to handle those things. But like Becky said, first step is see, are you actually being limited? Are you seeing fewer impressions than you did prior to when that red bar of, I guess not quite death, but of sickness pops up in your account. On the fixing side of things too, I'd say there's a lot of things that we're seeing in terms of even what keywords are on your website. Like Lucian mentioned, ad copy is very important. How your ads are structured. We've seen things, Google likes this or doesn't like this, and so we've been able to help a lot of advertisers kind of navigate those waters and prove to Google that their ads should not be limited. And a lot of it's algorithmic as well. Again, it's Google is so much with automation. They're looking for maybe a specific phrase or a specific structure of ad, and so it's not even that you're just trying to argue common sense with somebody of, hey, we've spent millions of dollars with Google. Why on earth are you selling us that our ad account is limited and you don't trust us? And it's just it's the algorithm. It's the automated machine just flagging something. And so it's a process of figuring out what are they flagging, and then changing that, tweaking that so that it's not being flagged.
Yeah.
Going back, as I promised, to answer that second question, which basically is, if I want to change the form of payment in a Google Ads account, will that trigger Google to suspend an account again? The short answer is maybe. Like it's not supposed to. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing against Google policies of changing your payment method in your account, but it is what I would call a trigger change. It is something that Google's going to look at that new form of payment, and if they have any concerns with it, if you've entered something incorrectly and the information doesn't match up properly, or they're confused about, hey, how come this business name is on the payment profile but this business name is on the credit card, stuff like that, it could trigger an issue. So I wouldn't tell someone don't change your payment method, but I would say make sure you really need to before you do. If it's just a matter of preference of, oh, I like this number versus that number, you're going to be safer to not change things, not, create more risk. If it's, hey, this credit card doesn't work anymore, I've got to change it to a new credit card. Well, then yeah, obviously move forward. And the best way you can mitigate risk of creating any potential suspensions is just be really careful about how you enter the information, make sure it all matches up, make sure there's nothing that could look suspicious to Google. Again, make sure it's not a payment method you're using in other Google Ads accounts, especially any other suspended ad accounts, because those are all things that could cause Google to have further concerns. Awesome. Well, some fantastic questions today. So we covered some good ground, talked about limited ad serving, talked about the new changes. Becky, Lucian, any other things you want to throw out, things that we should make sure people know about before we wrap things up here?
Nothing on my end. Becky, can you think of anything super important that maybe people are talking to you about on the phone?
The only thing, and this has not been brought up yet, I think because everything's too soon, but the only thing that I think that everyone who is dealing with a suspension or trying to navigate it on their own needs to keep in mind is one other thing that was mentioned in the policy when Google updated it. And that is that with these new accounts that are getting suspended, there's a little bit of a blank space, a vague description that we may not always be able to appeal these suspensions. There may be a point in time where you can't anymore. There may be a point in time where Google's going to limit that because there is a little section that kind of mentions that, but we don't know what that means. So I think it's really important to make sure that if this is a valuable account to you, if it's important, that you reach out to somebody that can help you with it, because otherwise you may actually get to a point where you can't appeal again. Right now, we've pretty consistently always told people, no, we can appeal as many times as we want to. We've never gotten to a point with any account where we couldn't appeal. And so that's something that I think is in the unknown as we kind of navigate the next few months in this new world of suspensions where accounts are frozen and things are changing. So, we're happy to talk with people about this. We want to help you. I know sometimes it can feel like what the question asked earlier, why do I have to hire a third party to help me with this? And the long answer short is that, unfortunately, there isn't enough people to help you. There isn't somebody that can answer your questions. At a minimum, we can get on a call and answer your questions. It doesn't cost you anything to talk to us. So, reach out, ask us for help. If it's not us, ask someone else, because there may be a point where we won't be able to fix the suspension one day. So the sooner the better is the thing that I would recommend at this point when it comes to anybody that's newly suspended and dealing with like the frozen account or the inability to do advertiser verification or even appeal in some cases.
Yeah.
Yep. Good points, Becky.
Yeah. I just wanted to jump in too and say, like, Google's obviously changing a lot of things with their policies and their interface, but it's business as usual for us. So, we're still getting accounts unsuspended successfully. So even still, I would say, business as usual for us.
Yeah, we got one that was frozen unsuspended just yesterday already. So it's definitely something that is possible and we'll continue to do as often as possible at the same time.
Yep. No, I like ending this conversation on a note of hope. Like you both just said, we are still seeing accounts be unsuspended. It's not usually, it's never as easy and rarely as fast as we would like. So, there's a lot of hard work, a lot of persistence that Lucian's team puts in, lots of, back and forth with Google, trying different things, etc. But we still have a very high rate of fixing these issues, getting advertisers back online. And if you are in the unfortunate place where you have a suspended account, we'd love to help you. If you're watching this and we're working on an account for you already, have hope. We are still working hard for you and are confident that we're going to be able to find a way forward for you. And if you are not suspended, first, congrats. That's awesome. And also kudos for watching a conversation like this to be preventative and avoid getting into that type of a situation. And I would definitely recommend checking out our YouTube channel where we have lots of free content about suspensions, how they work, how you can prevent and avoid them so that you never get into this type of a situation. And again, best way to reach out to us if you do need our help with a suspension or with just regular ongoing management and making money from your Google ads. You can find us through stubgroup.com, fill out a form, call us, send us an email, whatever your preferred method of communication is. We'd love to chat with you, get on a call, get on a screen share, whatever the case may be, and see how we can help. So till next time, John, Becky, Lucian, signing off.